Good day. Here I am now making an opinion video about what I learned in environmental science, also known as ENSC 33. And I prepare a list of what I learned and also the explanations for them. This is the best thing that I have learned in environmental science. First, everything must come in moderation. Example, in using of resources, it is essential for us to use resources, but it is limited. We have to use resources moderately. It is good to get resource. For example, under exploitation of a certain fish species may lead to destruction of other fish species. The underexploited species will become invasive, and because of their number, resources they need to survive also increase. Just like us in human, in growing, for example, we need food. It is essential for us to survive. As our population continue in growing, also the number or amount of food we consume also growing. But unlike animals, we have the capacity to make and study ways to sustain our resources and to control consumption of resources. Overexploitation also lead to destruction because all resources have important role that we are all benefiting from. If we overexploit resources, this may lead to abnormal happenings in our ecosystem. So we have to be in balance use and we have to be in balance use and consumption of resources. Number 2, living or existence of resources is relevant to other resources. Number or amount of a certain resource will affect the survival and living of the resources that benefited from it and use it. For example, solar energy helps the planet to regulate its temperature, to regulate plants in terms of sunlight, helps on photosynthesis. Therefore, plants will produce their own food through sunlight. Plants are the primary producers we have. Next, people need meat from cow as food, especially for important occasions. Cow need grass as food to live. The soil is needed by the grass to grow and get nutrients. Human needs most of all things on earth. Animal need shelter and food. Plants need sunlight and nutrients from soil. Human need affects the resources. They has a great impacts on resources. For example, population control is needed because when human population increase, it will affect the air quality. If the 7 billion people in the world fart or yawn at the same time, this can lead to global warming. It sounds funny, but it's true. By controlling the population, we can conserve the resources. Every resources can affect one another and connected to each other. Number 3, we can change what happened in the past, but we must learn from it. We can't back instinct species, but we can sustain and maintain the, the existing resources and species. Even though we are human, the apex predator of the history, and we distracted a lot of resources, we can still have time to have actions to conserve resources, but unity now, this matter is hard now. Some are forced to exploit resources because they have to feed lots of people, but I think still there is solutions. People prefer easy ways. That is why they did it. When we think with considerations and about environment and resources, it is possible to address this kind of problem. Number 4, in order to develop a country, we have to develop the wise and effective use of resource. On explaining it, I will focus on our country, the Philippines. If we look at our country, it is rich. We are rich in resources, not in economic but environmental matters. For me, it's good, but when we look at people, lots are suffering because of poverty. It is very not relevant to say that we are rich in this kind of situation. Why we can't use our environmental resources to develop our country, to give jobs to poor people and to teach them? Based on what my teacher said, we can make it, but the real reason why we can't is we are poor in technology, knowledge, and because of our leaders. In addition, also, I think because we are not united enough, and also we focus on issues sometimes that is not really important, like competition in the government. I hope that following years after this crisis, we continue to do things to develop our country. But when we do use of resources to develop our country, we must use steady state subsystem. This is a kind of ecosystem economics wherein people get what they want in ecosystem, and if the ecosystem can provide, people make an adjustment on what ecosystem can provide to develop our country to sustainability. Number 5, the gap between developed country and developing country. Developed countries, mostly US, EU, Canada, and Japan, also Australia, and the developing countries, mostly Africa, Latin America, and Asia. Developed countries has high per capita GDP, having 1.2 billion people of population, while developing countries has moderate to low per capita GDP, having 5.2 billion population. We can categorize a country as developed or developing country based on their per capita GDP. If a country has a higher per capita GDP, we consider this as a developed country. And if this has a moderate to low per capita GDP, we can consider this as a developing country. Developed countries have large amount of budget for every person in the community. Developing countries have a lot of natural resources. Great example for this is Philippines. It is not exploits as compared to developed countries. They already use lots of their natural resources and gain revenue from it. The development and progression of rich countries is far higher than poor countries. Number 6. The best way to prevent tragedy of commons is to not overexploit resources and reduce activities that has negative impacts on environment. We must consider that our resources are limited. We should not overexploit them or overharvest. Tragedy of commons happen when a, a certain resource doesn't or not capable anymore to give, and it is destructed. Transferring animal species to the other place or country will result to negative impacts on environment. For example, a frog that called bufu toad, they are transferred in the place where there is no one has an authority to kill them in Canada. These frogs become invasive. They grow large than the normal of their size in the place where they come from, and they can eat even chicken. The chickens in that place in Canada is distracted. Some technology will affect the environment negatively. For example, air pollution is also cause of methane gas, comes from factory. In this situation, we must do or develop working by eco-friendly technology principles. Number 7. We have to guard our health by the enemies that some are not visible. The microorganisms that live in the water, which is polluted or unhygienic, can bring us disease such as diarrhea, typhoid fever, and cholera. Viral waterborne diseases like norovirus, hepatitis A, poliomyelitis, and rotavirus are actually get from stool. The underground of the toilet only store the dry part of the human stool, and the water part of the stool goes down until it flows to the faucets and basically flow to the water well. Bacteria or organisms target the nutrients from the food we eat. These organisms or bacteria make the digestion of food fast, trick or confuse the body that this really absorb the water and nutrient. Protect ourselves from nitrate, arsenic, lead, and manganese. These are heavy metals which can digest or in our stomach it can't digest. But before this go out on our body, this make problems and reactions inside our body, especially in our blood. Heavy metal can cause us sexual impotence. On female, this can cause irregular menstruation and other diseases. That is why people don't practice to drink water that comes from direct of underground. Water can also have bad bacteria. Heavy metals is harmless when it has right amount for our body, amount that can negatively affect our body. This can contribute to person's intelligence. Our cell has only have to contain right amount of heavy metal, little amount or just a decimal point of heavy metals. I'd like to thank my instructor for teaching me this kind of knowledge. I'm very thankful that I have learned a lot from him. And I use this video to say also that I apologize for not passing this requirement before the deadline.